Today's guest is Sonya Graywolf, CPA and owner of Ecommerce CFO.
Educate your money now.
Hello, and welcome to Educating Your Money podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Cruy-Case, owner of Matnick Bookkeeping Services. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Today's episode is called So You Think You Want to Sell Online. We will be discussing some important components and e-commerce business owners should be aware of, questions around inventory, and what items can be deducted. We would like to thank Out and About Business Solutions for sponsoring our podcast. Today's guest is Sonya Graywolf, CPA and owner of Ecommerce CFO. Sonya has been helping small businesses over 30 years, either working as an employee or with her own business. She has held positions from accounting clerk to controller and now her own business. Her interest has led her to specialize in the e-commerce area because of a position she held with a distributor and personal experience selling products. Thank you, Sonya, for being on the show today.
Well, thank you.
I think e-commerce businesses has always been like one of the more, at least as far as I was thinking, more complicated businesses to own because seem to be so many moving parts. But at the same time, it's probably some of the quickest or easiest businesses to actually start up. And with the pandemic, I think many e-commerce businesses were started out of a necessity, whether it was starting from a fresh idea or a passion that someone had and they had the time to be able to pour into that passion, or started as an alternative for an already existing business. And due to the pandemic, the e-commerce followers have grown. Obviously, the business owners have grown, so then the followers have grown, and there are some questions, Sonya, we'd like to ask you in regards to e-commerce.
Okay.
So one of the questions has to do with what are some important components that a business owner should be aware of if they decide to start an e-commerce business, and what should they look at or think about first?
There's different business models, and that's why I like e-commerce so much, is that it's still one of the areas where anybody can get into the business because there's different things that you can do. I mean, there's things from affiliates to having a full-blown store. And so I think the first thing is that you want to look at the different business models and determine based on how much money you have to start. To go ahead and determine what path you want to go, because it's going to make a difference as to what you want to do. And I have a e-commerce strategies giveaway that we're going to have, and that lists all those different types. It gives you, when you're looking out there, because you can go Google, e-commerce, and unless you really know about the different business models, you can't determine how you go about going to the next step.
And so for e-commerce, I think some may think that they may need to skip like the business plan portion. Is it still important for e-commerce to still create a business plan?
It's more important, I think, in a lot of ways. One of the components, depending on what business model, is that you're going to have to buy inventory. So not only do you sell the inventory that you have that you already purchased, but you have to be putting aside money when that, you sell all that to go ahead and buy more and have it timed in such a way that you never run out. So it's very, very important to figure out, sit down and do a business plan and figure out how you're going to do that as you start and, forward in the years.
You mentioned inventory. That's actually one of the next questions is how does an e-commerce know whether they need to maintain inventory for their product or on demand, I guess?
Well, I mean, you look at, for instance, the company that we worked as a distributor. you basically have to sit there and plan and know what is your average amount that you're selling on a daily basis, and plan out. And then we were getting inventory from overseas. So we also had, it took 3 months sometimes to get that up in. And so we'd have to go ahead and, make sure that we put that buffer in there to plan to get inventory in. If you're working in the US, it's not as, big a deal, because, nowadays you can get inventory the next day. But it's just, you have to constantly plan that inventory and make sure that you have enough to sell.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions around inventory, and for some reason, I think a lot of e-commerce, it's one of those things that I don't think it's easy for them to figure out, because there is some planning and probably some calculations on the back end that they have to do. So why is keeping track of inventory and then also integrating those numbers into their accounting system important?
Well, I mean, you have your accounting software that you're using to keep track of things. Most of the accounting software does not do keeping track of inventory very well. And so you want to get an app that does that. I was even looking at a Facebook group this morning where they were talking about they were doing an Excel spreadsheet to be able to do, the inventory and keep track of it. As you get, when you have a few SKUs, that's possible, but as you grow, you really need to look at some kind of app that does inventory to be able to integrate that into your software, because your accounting software, you want to bring in your totals to the accounting software, because most accounting software does not handle inventory correctly. So
your suggestion is for someone who may be looking into needing to track their inventory, that they should probably start looking into an app or some software that handles inventory, that's what it does.
Right, because it's going to keep, like QuickBooks, for example, it'll let you know, it'll notify you when you get low, but it's not a very, it's not sophisticated to do all those different things, because, when you're doing inventory, you have your SKU numbers, you have your quantity. I mean, you have different things that are going on, because you might have one type of product, but it comes in several different colors.
Right. So,
I mean, that's too difficult to expect an accounting software like QuickBooks or Xero to do. And that's really why these other softwares have sprung up. So.
Yeah. So what type of items or categories are commonly deductible for e-commerce businesses?
Well, you have your cost of goods sold items, and that would be your product cost. So you want to keep track of all your product costs, including your marketing costs, because your marketing cost, when you run an advertisement, you're running it by product. So you don't want to allocate that out to everything else. You want to keep that with that product. Because that gives you a true profitability of that product. So you want to be able to set up something so that you can go ahead and keep track of that, by product. And again, that's, why you want an inventory product that can help you do that. But then your other general expenses are the same that are deductible.
As with any other business.
Right.
Okay. When an e-commerce business starts selling in multiple states, what should they be made aware of regarding state sales tax filings?
Well, it used to be that with state sales tax that you could go ahead and just do the sales tax in your state. As long as you knew what was happening with that state, you were fine. But as more companies go online, and there's less brick and mortar, the states are going, hey, I got to figure out a way to get my piece of the action somehow in taxes. So Wayfair versus the South Dakota back in June of 2018 really changed a lot. And so once the Supreme Court basically said that South Dakota was right in trying to tax that, the different states now are saying, hey, now we can go back and change our laws and charge sales tax. So there's different, there's a lot of talk about, and it should be, we should change to a federal system, but we are where we are right now, and different states have different rules. So you need to keep track of that, and there's different limits, like selling 100,000 into a state would require you to do a sales tax return. But there are, again, with everything, with e-commerce, it's helps you to go ahead and get an app that will do that, that will feed again into you're going to make your life so much easier if you do that. So there are different apps out there that will do that.
Right. And then there's also for those that have e-commerce businesses that do quite a bit of selling in multiple states, there's also certain firms out there that will help them to be able to keep track, and they will help keep track of some of the states that they do business in.
Right. There's sales tax firms that's all they do. They do studies. That's their they specialize in that. I used to do sales tax return for my clients, but now I either send them to someone like that or do an app to keep track of that. There's so much going on with that you need somebody to be on top of that. So.
Right. And so those apps that you're talking about, they integrate with some of the e-commerce software and I guess things like that helps it so that it knows where it needs to take the tax.
It depends on what you're choosing. But for example, Shopify is one of the, if you had your own website on Shopify, they have it built in where they will calculate the tax. So they go ahead and do that, and then you can know from that what you need to charge. There's also, I need to highlight that there are marketplaces. It's easier to go after one company like Amazon or eBay instead of trying to collect from all the sellers on those marketplaces. So the states are going after them and making them responsible for keeping track of that information. So if you sell on one of those marketplaces, you do not need to collect the tax. They will take care of that. But then let's say you were on Amazon and then you also had your own website, then you'd want to go ahead and do a sales tax return for what you sell on your own website.
Okay. So yeah, so I know there probably was, like you said, now they're probably making them do some of the sales tax, but it was a time where they were kind of putting that on the seller, right?
Right.
And then it was up to you maybe they were telling you how much the tax was, but they may put it in your court to actually file those taxes with that state.
Right. So
yeah, there's been a lot of questions around sales tax.
Right. It's a changing landscape, and I think it will be for at least another year until we get, either get it on a federal level, so it's taken care of on a federal level, or where the states are coming together and saying, we're going to do this similar.
Right. So, they're in agreement
right.
to how it's going to be handled, because it's handled differently across the board.
Yeah, it is. And it's very, for instance, I'm in Colorado, and we have even local municipal governments that handle it differently than the state. So you have to go out and make sure you handle that if you sell into that municipality differently than you handle it if and the state doesn't collect it. You have to send it to that municipality. So it's all over the board.
Yeah, it can be very confusing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So Sonya, on top of offering a free discovery consultation, you have also prepared a couple of documents, called one being 8 commerce accounting metrics you need to be tracking, and e-commerce strategies for our audience if they're interested. Be sure to post #ecom if you would like to receive a copy of these documents. Sonya, can you tell us a little bit about these documents?
Well, we talked a little bit about the e-commerce strategies, And it goes through and just tells you the different ways, like on Amazon, you have two different ways. You can do Facebook, FBA, where they go ahead and you send the product to them and they ship it out, or FBM, which is where you ship it out. You take the order and you ship it out. Amazon also has, they have a handmade department, and I heard this week that they're also adding luxury clothing, I think. So they're constantly, changing, and you can get on those marketplaces. So this document just goes through and lists all those different opportunities. There's even a marketplace where you can do subscription boxes. So I encourage people to look at that list before they go and do a lot of Googling, so they can narrow down what kind of business they want to start. So, and then the other document, e-commerce metrics, is more targeted towards people that have started selling. And at first when you're selling, you just want to get some headway. You want to get some traction. After you've gotten some traction, you're going to look at, well, what's the best way of making sure that I'm going in the right direction? And these metrics they tell you how to calculate these different metrics so that you can look at those on a month-to-month basis and know if you're going in the right direction. I mean, there's other metrics that your marketing metrics that, people are, especially in e-commerce, keep track of. But they always don't remember to do that on the accounting side. So that's what this PDF has on it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Sonya for taking time out of her busy schedule and coming on the show and sharing her expertise. Be sure to post any questions or comments below. Let us know if there's a topic you'd like to have discussed on the show. Comment below or email educatingyourmoney@gmail.com. And if you are interested in receiving the e-commerce accounting metrics you need to be tracking and e-commerce strategies documents, be sure to post #ecom below. Sonya, if any of our followers wanted to get a hold of you or had more questions or wanted to talk with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can email me at Sonya, SONYA, at ecommercecfo.com. There's also, I have a Facebook group, e-commerce community, where you can ask questions. And so you can go in and join the group and ask your questions there. So
sounds great. Yeah, I know groups are very convenient when you have, you can have hundreds of people, sometimes thousands, all chime in to maybe a question you may have.
Yeah. But I've found Facebook groups really give you the basis, at least to know where to go look elsewhere. So it's nice to have a community that discusses those kind of things. So
yeah. I mean, especially business wise, I think it really works well when you have some people in an industry or experts that you can tap into, that if you did not have such a group, you would be sitting there Googling or trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. So
thanks for watching Educating Your Money podcast, where it's not just about making money, but about educating your money. See you next Monday for the next episode. Thank you and stay safe, everyone.